Hello.
Hey Nathan, how are you?
Hello, very good. And hello, Bridget, very special guest. Can you hear us, Bridget?
Hi. Sorry.
Hello.
Hi, Quava. Hi, Nathan.
Hello. It's good to see you.
Hello.
So,
Yeah, lovely to see you too.
so for everybody in the outside world, um, a bit of a random conversation. First things first, I think we've got to put on. If you're easily offended by crude language, this is not the place for you. Please leave now. This one there. We're just going to have a pretty no holds barred, open conversation about all things random across, Castleface, OSEES, and things in the past, and various musical projects. And yeah, let's kind of go from there. I think, to introduce you to some people a lot of people who will know you, some who maybe will not. I would say that you're a juggernaut of alternative music. The constant output over the last 2 decades and more, and things like that, from releases to your own material to other people's material to the influences that you've had on other artists across the board, has been simply phenomenal. Constantly evolving project of, I wouldn't say the John Dwyer show, I'd say various musical projects, and also from, graphic design, photography, alternative kind of art and music that blends across it. It's not just a simple kind of project that someone might see in recent years as the OSEES or some of the other well-known projects. So I want to kind of go down the line on that. And I think the last time I saw you in person, we were sat having a curry the night after the infamous World Cup semi-final, where you played on that night, and it was a bit of a dour shit show, right? But the gig wasn't.
I can't remember. Was that the one where we screamed the end of the game right before we played?
I think that's it, yeah. And then we went for a curry the next day to drown the sorrows. But it was
sorrow with a curry for sure. Yeah.
I guess that's one of the weirdest kind of shows you've ever played, right?
Well, I think it probably would have been weirder if we hadn't screened the game. And I remember thinking when it started that the audience was way more receptive than I expected them to be after the loss. Because when you go to the UK and there's a team playing the night, which seems to always happen to us in Manchester. They're always like, it's a big game tonight. If they lose, you guys might not play. There's always all this anxiety over having a game on the same night. But really, that Leeds show went off weirdly well from what I remember. Like it was, all the strife and danger that that haunts the vibe wasn't there in the end. People drank some beers and had a good time, I think.
I know it doesn't mean out to you personally as like an American, but from an English person playing in the semi-final of the World Cup, and it's the first time in my lifetime and many others, it was like a huge fucking deal, right? It was like, I can't explain it in a Super Bowl type of world, but I
think people get pretty fanatical about sports here too, especially about their local team, and also if it's been like a decade or two since they've been in the playoffs. It's sometimes some people it means a lot to them. You know what I mean? So I get it.
And when we found out it was that clash, it was like, what do we do?
The opening band, you're like, fuck off! You're not playing. We're gonna screen the game.
Yeah. So kind of in the first kind of bit that I want to approach is the first memories I have of you and Bridget turning up here at the Broodnell, and we kind of got on. It struck me instantly that it was kind of a community that went back to the San Francisco, back in San Francisco, because I remember Kristin driving you, right? Yeah, and Shade being around, and when I talk about all the associated bands that are around there and that come from that scene, and it's one of those things that I kind of approach and I go, it reminded me a lot of the particularly the scene around the Broodnell and the LS6 kind of DIY scene, and how everyone kind of blended across and merged bands and everyone played together. what's your kind of thoughts on that and the San Fran scene and everything you come from in that area and the artists that you played with back then?
Well, I know when we showed up to Brudenell, we tend to play the same places over and over again if we like them, and we had a sort of immediate link with you guys because what you're saying essentially was it was family-run business. Everybody loved you guys. You had a community. It was also a local social club kind of vibe, you know. So that's why we've been back repeatedly to book with you. But San Francisco, I was very lucky to live there when I did. It was always in my life I've fallen ass backwards into good situations. I've been very fortunate. And San Francisco was one of those that I lived there for 17 years, and there was such a crop of artists and people to work with, and I never anticipated when we started the label that we would be putting out other people's bands, but there was so much good stuff, and a lot of them, was their first release or whatever. So, it just made sense to keep it going. I come from Providence, which has a really big DIY scene with all the college kids, because there's not a ton of big clubs there. There's no real big labels. Most of the labels that we worked with or that were around were small independent labels, and all the music I liked when I was a kid was shit that was kind of a bit too weird maybe for mass consumption. So a lot of the labels that I started following were smaller labels. So I sort of vied to be that myself, Bridget knows. Bridget, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I moved to San Francisco from London in the hopes of being in a good band. And yeah, and then I found you at the coffee shop, and there it was.
World, yeah.
And it was a complete community. And Nathan, when we came to stay with you, I think you let us sleep upstairs with your mom and her little dog.
Yeah.
Right, like home,
I remember after the show, right, and they were like, "Oh, you can have this bed," and now, John, you can have this bed, and I remember you saying, "No, fuck it, I'm on the floor in the front room," right?
Yeah, that's all I did.
Yeah, and you just took that floor, and I was going to go on to speak about your photography and that, and I, in one of your books, there's still a photo of you and Kristin taking, on the patio upstairs, overlooking the distance with a green garage in the background. And it was quite, when I saw the book and I saw the photo, I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah, but man, one of the things that struck me about that was like, the photography where you're carrying your old cameras out of your bag, you just whipped them out and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But there was definitely a bonding feeling there about how, that kind of, let's sleep on floors, let's make each other food, and it comes from the same kind of community that we draw from, and that was quite pleasing to have that link, I think, with all the band at the time,
I think if I slept on a floor now, it might kill me, but I would still do it if I had to. I've gotten old now. But yeah, I remember one of my favorite memories from the first time we played there was we were up in your mom's apartment, and I think she was smoking, and I lit up a cigarette, and she's like, "No smoking in the apartment," and I was like, "Oh fuck, sorry." Then she was like, like this fucking guy, and I was like, "Oh, we're gonna get along great," She reminded me of my mom, She totally busted my balls, but she was like, "Shoes off," and we got to hang out for the night. It was a really pleasant evening, man. We've always had a great time there. But I have really fun memories of those first couple of times at the Brudenell,
Yeah.
As I'm sure.
Yeah. So can I ask, like, have you ever personally promoted a show? Have you ever put on a show yourself?
Have I? Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
In San Francisco. Not here so much, but back in SF, we did a lot of shows. Me and Bridge, when the band first started, even before that with OSEES, before OSEES, Coachwhips as well. We would play on the street and bring another band with us, or we did a lot of house shows and a lot of warehouse shows, which was really, feels like it's a dying breed. And, absolutely. We booked with a lot of clubs. I still do that occasionally. Like I'll put bands in touch with clubs, with places I like, and see if we can get them flown out for a show out here in LA or something. But, I really, one thing I kind of hope from this year is that some of that underground comes back. I can't tell if I'm just too old now and nobody invites me to these things anymore. But in LA in particular, there has been a good batch of underground venues like Non Plus Ultra, places like that, really small venues.
Yeah, everyone used to talk about the smell and stuff like that, right?
The smell's actually a pretty officious place, and it does actually smell. But I think they're still holding on by a fucking thread, man. But I'm really hoping that some of that underground vibe comes back out of necessity with all these clubs closing,
Yeah, I hope
so.
And generator shows. That would be nice, you know, outside. I've heard of some people in SF doing that, but those were the funnest, man.
All the memories, for the most part, either come from small clubs or shows like underground. Like I rarely remember festival shows; they become a blur. You know what I mean? Not that there's anything against those, but you know what I mean. Like the real personal space kind of stuff are the things that I really take to the grave.
Yeah, and aside from putting on, like I say, your own bands and putting on that, is there ever been a time where you've gone, I really fucking love this band, and I need to get in touch with them, and I need to put that band on, and I need to bring them to LA, San Fran. Which band was it? And have you ever kind of like lost money on them, as in like you've had to pay for it out of your own pocket, and no one's turned up?
I've been really good. Well, first of all, I pick really good bands, so we've always been lucky with like things like the perfect example is the Blind Shake. OB&3s, we took them on the road. Uranium Club Now, I got them out here to LA last year because they live scattered all over the States now. But losing money, there's definitely been shows where there were less attended shows, but always scrape by. Again, just I think a mixture of being fortunate and also just having things that people really want to see in the underground, like really interesting bands and stuff. There's been so many shows. I mean, back in the day in San Francisco when I was a kid, I would book at Chemo's a lot. Matt Shapiro was booking there, which was like sort of a drag queen bar. But we would book tons of noise shows, and I would kind of be more eclectic in my booking, I think, than I would have the balls to do now. So we would book like, Extreme Elvis with Zeke Sheck and Warm Fucking Jets, 3 bands that were really underground. And always managed to just get by, and everybody made a little bit of money. But the shows were always fantastic. I don't think I've ever booked a show where I was like, "What a bunch of fucking assholes!" Like that is more for somebody who owns a club, I'm sure, to be like, "Oh." At the end of the night, most of the people that I deal with are people I've reached out to or I'm already friends with, that I have a sort of commonality with, and everything is just people dig. I think playing small shows like that too, for the most part.
Yeah. The Eagle in SF. That was my favorite place to play. And
oh my God,
did you book those Thursday nights, or you and Doug did? Doug Hilsinger was the main booker there, but I brought a lot of bands through. I definitely brought bands through that they hated. The Leather Daddy Bar was like, fuck these guys, but only musically, never personality wise. We never had any personality issues. And I do think I remember bringing people through that were more like friends of mine from the East Coast who were like a gay bar, and I'd be like, you're gonna love it. Put aside all your bullshit. And then at the end of the night, every time they'd be like, this is the best place we've ever played in the history of our whole fucking band. And I was like, yeah. And they, that kind of goes a long way for me too. Like opening up people's minds a bit with shit like that was always fun,
Listen, saying stuff like that reminds me of 10, 15 years ago, bringing people to the Broodnell, in the middle of outskirts of a city. Mm-hmm. in terraced houses, turning up to this building in the car park with fucking garages either side it, and they think, by the side of it, they're walking in, and some of these people are, Joanna Newsom played here, and she's thinking, what have I come to here? And at the end of the night, they're walking out. Exactly, at the end of the night, they've had a great gig, and the atmosphere is good, and that's what matters, right? That's about the kind of vibe, rather than what's going on the street outside,
Nathan, your fucking joint is like a palace compared to some of the places we've played upon outside judgment. When you walk up, we've definitely played some places where I've been like, this ought to be interesting. You know what I mean? So I think the Broodnell to me is maybe I just love things like that. But that place to me, when we walked in, I was like, fuck yeah. Because when we were kids, we used to book a lot of shows at places like KFC's. I don't know if you have those in the UK, but it's like a Knights of Columbus hall. It's like a weird like rental hall or Veterans of Foreign Wars, VFWs, where you can rent the old fucking vets hanging out at the bar drinking, and sometimes they would even be like, band's all right, and I'd be like, yes. Like if the old guy drinking at the bar isn't pissed at the end of the night, but like I love that communal showcase place.
Realism. You mean like down to earth realism, people.
Not a black painted club, but like an actual place with a lot of personality. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So your first band musical project, was he ever, like at school, at college, fucking teenager? What?
I didn't go to college. I actually was just saying this morning, I was like, this reminds me of school. Like somebody was explaining to something to me, and I was like, God, I fucking hated school. So I was supposed to be the first one in my family to go to college, and I remember my mom's just momentary disappointment when I was like, I'm not going. And she's like, really? And I was like, yeah. And then she went, fuck it. You know, she got over it immediately. But I did meet a lot of college kids in Providence because there was Brown University and RISD. So there's always a crop of young people coming through. And so I played with a lot of students. And my first band was a band called Krang, which was with Jeff Rosenberg from Pink and Brown. And it was just like a weird, I want to call it like a math rock band that we played a few shows, never put out a record or anything. It's not, I don't even think the songs are out there. I think I would probably be a bit embarrassed.
What did you play? Guitar?
When I was learning guitar, yeah. We were not bad. But now when I go back, I've listened to it like 3 years ago and I was like, oh, for fuck's sake, you know? Yeah. But yeah, and I don't know. Bridge, well, your first band was a big soul band, yeah?
It was a northern soul band, actually. It was all these kids in Santa Cruz, and this much older guy. When I was like, I'd known them, a lot of them since I was 14, and this one guy, Rick, was like 21 when I was 14, so he bought all the booze for everyone.
Rick?
But he was a huge, but he was a huge northern soul record collector. And eventually he started a band years later and asked me to audition, so I had to audition. And yeah, I mean, we danced. We did like dancing, and I'm actually still in touch with the girl I sang with. She's an awesome lady, and she lives in Tennessee. And yeah,
do you still know the dances?
Yeah, some of them. To the Magic Touch, I still remember it, and all the backups. Those songs are great, man.
Are we gonna get to see one during this call?
No, definitely not. Privately, I will show you, but no.
I think we need to also mention your new project, Bridget. You know, while we're here, we need to give some praise to that, because that's like awesome. You know, when I remember that when I heard it first time, I was like, oh, this is fucking come out of left field. It's great. So we need to kind of give a big shout out and tell people they need to go and listen to, you know, your new project that's out on Castleface as well, right?
Yeah, totally.
See, keeping it in the family right there.
Absolutely.
She's gonna. You're gonna try and tour next year, right? When the Earth stops rotating the wrong direction.
Yeah. I mean, who knows what will happen? I you know, maybe there are gigs at the end of the year, but we'll see what happens.
We had something lined up with John before. John got in touch and we had something lined up. So, you know, we were gonna get something, but everything's on hold, obviously.
Yeah, it's a bit of a Jesus. We just all have to learn how to paint and make clothes and do other things.
I've been reading like a madman.
Yeah.
Boring.
I know. I'm asking for recommendations from every single person I know for anything.
So I was going to ask you something. You said you didn't go to college, right? But you went to the Rhode Island School of Design. Is that right? No. You didn't?
No.
Did you go to school with Tim Harrington or anything?
I know Tim, but I didn't go to school with any of those guys.
So I've got a question from Tim. Tim asked me.
Harrington, fuck.
Yeah, exactly. Fuck, right?
Uh-oh.
We've got a question for him saying, are you at the stage in your life now when you can talk about the hydrogen terrors?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I'm still in touch with Dan, and I've been wondering about Guy Benoit, who's a singer. They were a band in Providence, one of the very first bands I ever saw, kind of a Stooges. The singer guy was a real weirdo. I remember when I was a kid, I thought he was like 50, but he was probably more like 25. You know, when you're young enough that you're like, that guy is fucking old and terrifying, but then you meet him later, you're like, oh, he's a totally calm little ass dude who's making films, like mellow ass guy. Great band. I'm Dan. The Dan that played bass in that is a singer in a band now called Hammer Party. He was also the singer of Landed. I mean, I've seen Tim's band, La Savvy Fab, play probably more times than I've seen my own dick. What a curse. Sorry, Bridge. She's leaving. I'm out. But yeah, I mean, Providence was really small, so I saw all those bands. But the Hydrogen Terrorists was a great live band, and they were definitely one of the first bands I ever saw. It's still shaping my mind. I saw them and like Drop Dead and Rorschach all in the same week, and I felt like I'd been raked over the coals. It taught me a lot, you know.
How old were you?
I was scared of Drop Dead. They were terrifying. And now I know them, and they're like, oh, thanks so much. They're like, yeah, I'm a vegan. They're really nice guys. I don't like animals, you know, getting killed. So But when I was a kid, I was like, they're gonna kill an animal on stage. But I was so wrong. I was just judging them for out of ignorance.
Yeah, and like Bridget said, how old were you then?
Fuck, that was probably, I'm gonna guess like 18, 19, maybe 20. I didn't really start going to shows. So there was a place in Providence called Club Babyhead that had a lot of all ages shows, and a lot of people came through there because I think it came pretty renowned with the hardcore and punk scene. So I get to see so many bands that I don't even want to mention because it's kind of embarrassing that I went to go see. But I saw lots of punk bands. I saw the Cramps play there. I saw Mercury Rev play there. I mean, we're talking a club that's half the size of your club, Nathan. It's a really small joint. That place I think is a club called Hell now, and it's just like a nightclub. And I haven't been there since they changed the title to Hell. It sounded appropriate. But yeah.
How many? So one of the same friend who texted me earlier about saying like, "Oh, you look like an art thief lately," right?
Mm-hmm.
He texted me like, how many times have you seen Lightning Bolt? That's another question.
Probably as many times as more times than I've seen La Savvy Fav. But I got kicked out of a band and got kind of a ride with them, partially back across country. I've known Brian and Brian for years. Since I was a kid in Providence, I lived across the street from Fort Thunder. It's pretty much those guys I owe a lot to in terms of showing me DIY. Same thing with Dan from Dehydration Terrors and Landed, teaching me how to just do it myself because nobody was knocking on my door when I was a kid. The music I was making, Pink and Brown, couldn't put our fucking record out with anybody for so long. We were trying for like over a year, sending cassette tapes out to fucking Drag City and Sub Pop and shit like that, and none of that shit panned out, as you can see. But I mean, Chippendale and Brian, I saw Lightning Bolt so long ago that I remember thinking they sucked, which is insane because they're probably one of the best bands that have ever been on the planet. But I remember watching them and being like, these guys are a mess. That being said, I saw them like a month after that, and I was like, holy fucking shit. So, like, I don't know what was going on that first night. Maybe I was wasted or they were, but, or Gibson, not Chippendale. Chippendale doesn't get fucked up. But after that, the door just opened, and I went to go see every project that they did. They had, multiple side projects over the years. Chippendale did tons of shit. Me and Gibson played together for a long time doing improvisational stuff in my warehouse.
I can't think of what Brian's other Black
Puss.
Black Puss, yeah.
Disgusting.
Yeah, Brian's been here and played that,
His
couple of times.
record is unbelievable. He's got a baby now or a kid, and I think he like plays. He has to like record that stuff at like 5 a.m. now. Like right before the child wakes up.
5 a.m. That noise.
A nightmare. Yeah, the dude. I can't imagine him with a baby because his lifestyle. I remember I would have to go get Chippendale out of bed, like physically drag him out of bed for something. I don't remember what the hell it was for, but like going in his room, which smelled like a bear cave and which pitch black, and dragging him out of bed physically at like 4 p.m, being like, God, is he fucking dead? And that's just his schedule was the opposite of mine, So I can't. With a baby now, he's really getting taught a fucking lesson. I'm guessing where he's like, no, you will be awake during the day now. You have to feed this thing 3 times a day,
So kind of major influences. You talked about some of the early bands, but I guess some of the influences aren't as obvious as what you just say musically. Some of them are art, some of them are, like it brings into your photography. Some of it where you talk about, the posters and the graphic design you do. I mean, let's talk about some of the influences that people wonder what brings into your music and the covers and why you do your own design. We talked about DIY just then, that's particularly important for me and a lot of my friends that I kind of have around. So I think it is that community. But what's your kind of influences?
Well, I mean, for me, it's I haven't done a ton of our covers. I've done a handful of them, but it's been a while. But I mean, I think it's fairly obvious, and I know I get made fun of for it sometimes. But like things like sci-fi fantasy novels and things as like role-playing games from when I was a kid. I always loved that art. I always loved that art that Gary Gygax, the artist that he picked out for stuff. I always thought that was really cool. I'm still into that shit, But also, I mean, Frazetta, I mean, a lot of pulp novel art. I feel like I bought so many books in my life that had really cool covers where the book may or may not be terrible, but it's worth paying $1 or $2 for a book that has incredible art on it. And it's made me search out and get in touch with some of these artists online. Like me and Bridget have both worked with Kyle Ranson, for instance, who's a painter that we know. He did her record cover this last year. He's painted murals at my house. I have a huge one that I have to look at every fucking day. That's so beautiful and so massive that I don't even notice it anymore. Like people will come over and be like, "Wow, look at that!" And I'll be like, "What?" And like the wall. I'm like, "Oh yeah, the wall." You know, like I don't even. You know how it is in the club. It's the same thing where you probably don't even see the stage anymore. But we've been with visual art. We've been very fortunate because we've been surrounded by great visual artists as well as musicians. And in San Francisco, still in touch with all these people. You know?
I was going to ask about, you know, what I thought was great in COVID is you had the Castleface, the COVID poster that you're selling online. You know,
Dylan McConnell, he's like
exactly.
Yeah,
I thought that was, you know, it's a storytelling. It's a kind of realistic pantomime take on what's happening in the world as well.
That's all him too, man. He has a very dark sense of humor. Sometimes to the point where I have to be like, "Are you okay?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm fine." Like I think he expunges that darkness through his art, and that COVID thing was a real teller, and I think everybody can kind of relate to that. But it was also based on an old Kmart ad. Originally, it didn't say our band name on it, and I was like, we could probably sell these if we affiliated the band somehow. So I sort of took his idea and like bunged it up with mine, and we sold it on Castleface so that we could split some money with him so that he could make a little extra scratch. As he's a visual artist, so he's made a bunch of shit this year, but I think it's been slow for him as well as all of us, you know.
I think everybody's seen where there's a lot of you know, in a graphic design art world, everyone's been selling T-shirts, merch, and people have been buying it to get by and support each other. And I think there's a point comes where it's saturation, where someone can only buy so much. Do you know what I mean? Or support someone so much, and it's really difficult when everyone wants to do that.
Absolutely.
Musical influences, you know, everything. What instantly stand out? Where do you just Tommy gun straight at us?
Bridget, you go first on this one.
I was thinking for you, and I was thinking AC/DC, right? Like that story when you learned why you wanted to learn to play guitar was AC/DC, because I really loved that when I was a teenager too.
Yeah,
so,
I still do. I recently looked up how much their records cost on Discogs, because I was like, maybe it's time I own these records again. You know, it's been a long time. And I was like, what the fuck? Like all their early records are like $60 a pop. They never repressed that shit because they're owned by maybe some Australian label or whatever.
Maybe so.
But I revisited it, and it turns out I still love pub rock and I love AC/DC. You know, Australia did that real good. You know.
Yeah, they did. But,
always for me it'd be Can. You know, like I can talk about them all day, and krautrock in particular, and like post World War Germany's take on a lot of things like. Of jazz and rock and roll and psychedelic and you know, just I don't know what it was, but I think after something so horrific, people's art output was through the roof and really extraordinarily strange, and that stuff really spoke to me. But it also brought me into the world of all their influences, you know, like Stockhausen. I learned a lot about from Erwin Schmidt's past before Can, where he was a composer and conductor of just like looking at a bunch of music concrete kind of stuff. And it's like an endless wormhole, especially now when you're locked at home with the internet. You can just dive all day on music. Me and my friends are sending shit back and forth to the point where I think we're sick of each other. You know, now it's just like it's a way to poke them and be like, enjoy this, asshole. You know,
that's I think wonderful about this time, right? Like just sinking into music in a way that I haven't feel like what with work and all the stuff that you do in your life, like haven't had time to do. And this year has been the year of like, I'm going to listen to every single record that Brian Eno made. I'm going to listen to, every single record that David Bowie made. Like even just, that sounds like you're just covering the basics, but it's so good to do that. That's been incredible.
Bowie has been a lifesaver this year. You know which one is for me, has been killing me this year? And I mean, I've always liked it, but this year it really came to a head was Let's Dance. I don't know why, but the record, I put it on one day and I was like, I feel twice as good as I did at my best this year listening to that album. So I really got a kick on like 80s Bowie, like Scary Monsters. Just somehow it was the shit I always ignored because I grew up with those songs and they were on the radio, so I didn't really give a shit. And I was always delving, in his earlier catalog. But when I finally got to that this year, I was like, oh, the perfect album. Fucking Stevie Ray Vaughan playing guitar on that. That sounds like a terrible idea to me, but it's so perfect. Somehow you're like, this is amazing,
Do you know when you were talking about? Sorry, go on.
Oh no, I once was in a band with Archie. When he was doing that Blowy band.
Mm-hmm.
Our friend Archie, and I was briefly for 2 gigs in a band with him as Tom. My God, I'm going to forget his name now because it's COVID and my brain is turned to mush. But the guy with hair.
The guy with hair.
The guy with hair in the top hat.
That one guy with hair over there.
It doesn't
but
narrow
learning
it down.
to sing those songs like Panic in Detroit and Black Country Rock and like kind of going through all of that solidified kind of my love. Because Panic in Detroit is a hard song to sing. I don't know if you remember that one.
Bowie's fucking songs are deceptively simple sounding, I think. And especially when you get into that sort of middle era shit where his band was all ringers and it was getting really complicated.
Yeah.
But then you see it live and it sounds fucking perfect because it's all those same people playing,
Yeah, he did that well, for sure.
The Bowie cover band that she's talking about was a San Francisco short-lived band called Blowy because everybody was really into drugs at the time. And it was our friend Archie who was known as the man with the golden underpants because he could pretty much get away with anything. I don't know how he wasn't murdered 10 times a night when we would hang out with him. He was such a fucking
charming.
But he was a fantastic Bowie improviser on stage, and he would just basically put on like sparkly underpants and like stand on tables at bars, and it was really fun. It was a very
it was no holds barred, really.
A strange summer that I barely remember, I guess. Yeah.
Do you know when you were talking about Can?
Yeah.
And so like Damo Suzuki's been on his never-ending world tour kind of thing. And have you ever thought about, because normally he just gets a backing band, right? And he turns up. So have you
is my understanding.
Exactly. So it'd be pretty amazing for you to have the backing band. Have you ever thought about kind of trying to do that?
I don't know how the fuck this has happened, but I've managed to never see him live. I've even seen Malcolm Mooney perform live, and it was fantastic with a friend of mine that does a band with him. But I've never seen Damo Suzuki, and he's played with tons of people I know, and I hear it's always great. And the man's a legend, and he is, to me, like kind of one of the ultimate voice as an instrument because it's so not tied down to lyrics often, and it's more just like, I don't want to say scat because that really rings a weird bell that's hard to unring, but he's like maybe like Linda Chirac or something in his singing, where it's like this real. It doesn't have to be sensible or sensible. It can be like just a noise, and that I recently saw the guys from Pavement covering Can, and I found it so irritating because it seemed like a shabby imitation of something that you can't really imitate. Like when people ask me to cover Can over the years, which has happened a few times, I refuse to do it because they're like the one band, almost like the Beatles or something, where you're like, you shouldn't do it. It's already good.
But when Damo plays, right, nobody really covers it. They just play their own improvised music, and then Damo,
which is
exactly.
Yeah. That's why I think he left Can, was because it was getting a little too screwed down for him. I think he didn't enjoy making Future Days, which is a real fucking shame because he's so good on it. It's such a good record. But I think if you listen to a lot of the live stuff they were doing around that time, it really, like 90% of it was just them jamming on stage. And I think that's what he lived for. And I think that's what the torch he took with him from that band was to continue that for the rest of his life. Even while sick, he's been out playing shows,
So what I'm getting to here is what we need to do is we need to arrange you as the backing band going out on a tour with Damo and
I would at least
joint.
be interested in doing a show with him. From what I understand, he still, I don't know if he still does, but my buddy who met him a few years back said he had seen him play and they were on tour and they played a show together, but not on tour together, just randomly. And the next morning he woke up and he said Damo Suzuki was just sitting on the couch, smiling, looking at him while he was asleep on the floor. And he woke up and he was like, whoa. In his brain, he's like, holy shit, Damo Suzuki's just staring at me while I sleep. And then he sat up and he's like, good morning. And he's like, do you have any weed? And he just didn't roll a joint.
Do you know he's one of the people who my mum was like, listen, just go outside, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Can't stink out the venue with it.
You can't teach an old dog new tricks, especially
Nah.
a Japanese dog. He's gonna do whatever the fuck he wants. The man has been smoking dope longer than I've been alive, I'm guessing. I would love to play with him. I know we've been in touch with Malcolm Mooney because we were supposed to book, or I was curating some of the Guess Who Fest last year that got canceled, and Malcolm Mooney was actually on it.
Wow.
So I've been emailing with him, which is insane to email with one of your heroes. Just be like,
another great person that's in the background, right? The Guess Who is Bob, right?
oh, Bob's the best.
Exactly, and you know, people don't realize there's these people in the background. I'm going to bring one in now who's sat here, another special guest, right?
Bring him in.
Here is Mark Riley just to join us. You know, it's a bit like a gathering at the pub with Freddy Krueger coming in, but he's lost his hat and his glove.
For nightmares. Hi John, hi Bridge, hi Nath, how you doing?
You all right?
Yeah, I've been watching. I've been watching you for the last 20 minutes. I know what you've been saying.
Yeah, don't worry, it's all been about you. About how they don't want to come and play sessions anyway. But Bridget's coming to play a session next year. I've already arranged that session next year. You know.
Yes,
really?
Definitely.
Right, there we go. Well, there you go. That's one session booked in. So optimism costs nothing. Eh?
It's a done deal.
Listen, I just heard you talking then about your influences, and I don't know if you remember, but we backstage. I think it was at the Victoria Park show. And we were talking about New Wobham.
About who?
New Wobham, the new wave of British heavy metal.
Oh, yeah, New Wobham. Gotcha. Yeah. I'm a huge fan of British heavy metal, obviously. Yeah.
It's the worst acronym ever, New Wobham. But I just want to show you that.
Fucking nice. Nice. Well done.
If you ever do a session for us, you can have it.
Oh. You know, I have a shocking amount of Iron Maiden memorabilia for having never fucking seen them. I've always missed the opportunity somehow. But I have action figures, fucking T-shirts, posters, like an idiot. I would be the guy that would gladly wear an Iron Maiden shirt to the show, which I think is a classic Iron Maiden thing. Is if you're not wearing a Maiden shirt, everybody knows you're a fucking narc. You know.
Well, do you know, Bruce Dickinson used to be on Six Music. He used to have a heavy metal show on Six Music, and I'm not sure why he was shown the door. I mean, he's one of the biggest rock singers in the world, and they got rid of him. But I was at a party with him, a Six Music party one day, and everybody was getting drunk, and he was drinking water. And I said to him, "Why are you drinking water?" He said, "I'm on standby. I might get called in a moment to go and fly a plane." You know, because he's a pilot, isn't he?
It's Dickinson, yeah.
And he was on call.
The documentary is great.
He's the tattooed millionaire.
The documentary, right? Flight 666.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
You probably recommended that to me, Johnny.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Nico getting hit with that golf ball. He took it like a champ. Yeah. I saw their plane once. I've never seen them, but I saw their plane parked at LAX, and I almost drove off the road to take a picture of it with the fin sticking up over the fence with Eddie's face on it. Choice moment in my life.
Yeah.
Are you a fan of Saxon?
Yeah.
Right.
One of the sexiest metal bands of all time, mate.
Well, you see, I'll bow to your knowledge because I don't really know them. But do you know that there was a guy who, the guy who was a tour manager for Saxon was a consultant on Spinal Tap?
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Saxondale.
Yeah.
What about Slade? Slade is a good-looking band. They were highly underrated in the States, I feel like. And then, of course, we had Quiet Riot that had played, I think, 2 of their songs and became hugely famous for covering these already ridiculously awesome, like heavy glam metal songs. But that's a crazy. Bridget, have you ever seen what Slade looks like?
Oh yeah, I love Slade's Christmas song.
Did you ever have
none of you English people judge me, but I really love it. It's working in problems over here.
Did you ever have the Slade bangs?
I would never do that. Can you imagine?
Maybe it's time.
Yeah, the thing with Slade is that they were just absolutely massive. But if you were talking about Bowie a moment ago, you weren't allowed to like Bowie and Slade. It was one or the other. And I was a Bowie fan. And there was a guy who lived around the corner from me, and he came up to me and said, "You like David Bowie, don't you?" I said, "I do, yeah." He said, "I like Slade." And he hit me.
That's a very English battle.
Where do the Bay City Rollers fall into that equation then? Slade, Bowie. They
were for the toddlers. They were kind of the next generation from glam, weren't they? You know. So, but the weird thing is, I read that the Ramones based themselves on partially the Stooges, but mainly the Bay City Rollers. Have you ever heard that?
No.
Oh, wow.
They have that pop sentimentality that I could hear that though. The Ramones loved pop. I mean, they had fucking Phil Spector produce an album. They loved pop rock, you know. Yeah,
they all wore the same gear as each other. It was kind of they used the Bay City Rollers as a blueprint, which is pretty crazy, but I believe it's true.
No, that sounds about right. And they were probably huffing gas listening to fucking Bay City Rollers. It probably sounded like the Ramones to them. Who knows?
Yeah. I mean, my gran, when I was into Bowie, my gran bought me a Bay City Rollers Christmas album, and I've an annual rather, and she signed it to me, and I was, listening to. At this point in time, it's 1975. I was listening to Bowie and Lou Reed and these kind of bands, and obviously they were doing all the things that all the other bands did, but they didn't want anybody to know. So they've got pictures in there of them drinking tea backstage after the gig with the manager with a tray and a pot of tea. It's a great. You can't have that, but that's great.
An English friend of mine, who I don't know if you guys know, but he has a great story about playing a festival with White House, and I was like, "Oh, what were they like?" And he's like, "Well, I blundered into their backstage by accident right before they went on, and they were sitting at a table with each other, and they looked like two math teachers, and they were moisturizing their hands." He was like, "No, yeah." He said they were both like putting on like cocoa butter, you know.
I have to say, White House.
White House, yeah.
White House played here, I don't know, a long time ago, 10, 12, 14 years ago, right?
I don't think they're allowed to play anymore. Yeah.
No, and I've got to say that, physically, it was one of the most intense, horrible experiences. It was
speechless.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how to explain them for people who don't know White House. It's extreme noise to the extent.
I don't know them now, so I'm a lightweight.
Yeah.
I just love the vibe, the outward vibe of that band, and then you get backstage and they're applying moisturizer to each other's elbows. It's like really they're just like two old men, you know. And this was like 20 years ago, I think. But it doesn't surprise. I mean, now we have tea backstage as well. It's a lovely thing to have when you're on the road every day in the rain or whatever.
I was in a band. It was a terrible comedy-driven band with another DJ not so long ago. About 12, 15 years ago, probably. But on the rider, we used to make sure that we had 12 pairs of socks every night. Mm-hmm. So we'd go home with a nice clean pair of socks on. I think Jerry Lewis on his adaptation, didn't he, with socks?
You'd put 3 pairs on each hand and foot and walk around backstage like a cat. Nathan, you got any questions for Mark or anything, man?
Yeah, so what I wanted to go on and also one of the reasons why we brought Mark in is that, very recently you released John on Castleface, the fall live at St Helens Technical College in 1981. Mm-hmm. I mean, how does a live album from 1981, 40 years ago, suddenly come to release on Castleface 40 years later?
Well,
has it got out to do with Mark sat there?
Well, it fell into our lap because Mark actually sent it over because he knows that I'm a big fan of fall bootlegs. So I've been buying so many of them over the years. It's like the Fall and the Velvet Underground have some of the most amazing sounding and terrible sounding bootlegs. Like it's like somebody recorded it on a coconut outside of the venue sometimes, but then some of these soundboard or the band would be just so on fire that night. So it's a real mixed bag. And he had sent over the that on YouTube, and it was just one of the best fucking live shows I'd heard of the fall, recording wise and the general vibe. And it's a funny story. I reached out to the guy on the YouTube, and he told me to go fuck myself. And then we got the record anyway, so we put him in the thank you notes with an extra for him. That being said, you know, we did it partially for the Manchester charity, and it was really fun to work on with the guys from the band that are still around. Yeah. And man, everybody's been so psyched on that, really. And I mean, I have friends of mine who are total music nerds who are like, "Fuck off! How did you get this record?" You know, and I was like, "Yeah, everybody." The guy who bootlegged it, you know, and we got your friend photographer who'd send over some old photos. It's just a fantastic release. We were really lucky to get that. It was just that we know Mark, you know.
I'm going to bring up a picture of this on.
I have
here.
a copy here if you want me to hold it up.
There we go. You see.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're saying is, I'm going to do a bit of a sales pitch here and say, you know, support the charity and go buy it if you can, and go onto Castleface and go and see it, because it's a worthwhile, definitely a worthwhile watch and a worthwhile, you know, kind of go to. So a bit of sales pitch. But Mark, how did you did you have any way in getting that over to John, actually, the audio and stuff? How did you kind of come to arranging it?
It was so simple. I mean, really, there's so many, as John said, there's so many bootlegs out there, and there's so many links. I mean, there's a gigography of the fall, and they've got all but about 3 gigs that they ever did. So, you know, it's all there to be had. And I hear some of them, and I'll listen to a couple of minutes and then turn them off. But I listened to about 20 minutes of that one, and I thought, this is better than the rest I've heard in a long time, you know. So I just, as John said, I know he's a fan, and so I sent him just a link to listen to, and then I don't know how long afterwards it was a matter of hours, and you got back, didn't you, and just said that I want to put this out. And it was funny because you said, I'm going to get in touch with the guy who put it on YouTube, and I'm going, well, yeah, you can, but I mean, you know, I don't think whoever put it on YouTube actually physically owns it. It's a bootleg. So, but you did, and
I was trying to be nice.
I wonder if Alex Stasco actually recorded it or out like that, because Alex, John, you probably don't know Alex, right? But Alex is a pretty legendary gig goer in Manchester, right, Mark? Who, you know, is probably one of the only people that gets let into venues because he's been going to them that long, and gets to put his.
This guy, I think I've met him.
And just puts his, you know, recorders around the stage. Yeah. And I go, and there's several fall recordings from the Brood now online from it and from everywhere I go, and from all the gigs that I just go to, and it's like, you know, all the Smiths kind of hooky stuff is Alex, right, Mark?
Yeah, I don't want to incriminate him, obviously, you know, but
yeah, we won't talk about that in the background, but
yeah, no, he's been there forever, Alex. I mean, it would be a case of, like I say, you just walk in blatantly with his gear and put it on the stage, and everybody just let him get on with it. But he's just documenting it, and they weren't selling it, you know. And I think the real crunch for this album was the idea of the charity for Centrepoint, the homeless charity, you know, which is obviously needed more now than ever. So the combination was great. What made me laugh, John, was you said it normally takes about 6 months of band members bickering, but I got in touch with Steve and Paul. And then the day later, Paul got in touch with Craig Scanlon. Of course, Mark's not with us anymore. And within about 4 days, I got back to John and said, yeah, everybody's in. It's fine. I can get you some photographs if you want. And it was that easy. So we probably should have been much more difficult about it. But next time.
Yeah, I mean, I had a listen. It's an amazing album. Kind of moving on. Oh, actually, stay on that. Mark, is there any kind of memories from that era that you want to share with us? And while I'd say that's a kind of influence of John while we're talking it, we might as well involve everyone in it. We've involved Bridget, and we've got involved in gigs here. So let's ask you on something like that.
Do you know, most of my time in the fall and my experiences are in Steve Hanley's book, The Big Midweek, because we were inseparable. I mean, for most of the time, the fall was enclaves. Even when I joined, really, the enclave, I was flitting about in the middle. I was only 16, but I think Mark got me in because I was pliable, you know? And so and I know that, funnily enough, Martin and Carl both were friends with Steve Garvey, who later joined Buzzcocks. But he's a brilliant bass player. But Mark didn't want him in because he thought the power shift would go more toward Martin, who was a founder member, and Carl, who was a pretty good character, and Steve Garvey, the three of them, and then there would be Mark and Kay on the other side at the time that I joined, and Yvonne. But when Steve and Craig joined, who are my oldest friends, you know, yeah, we're inseparable.
What's he got in his fridge? That's what we want to know.
Oh, there's a head in there, isn't there?
Yeah.
That book is great, by the way, for anyone who's interested. Steve Hanley's book.
Yeah.
Hanley
Brothers, both Hanley Brothers books are great.
I haven't read the other one yet, but I will. Yeah.
Yeah, Paul Hanley's book about Hex and Ducks now. Yeah, that's great as well. But so everything that needs to be said pretty much about my time in the Fall is in Steve's book. But then again, you get the extra 14 years that he was in more than I was, you know. So yeah, I started out as really good friends with Mark, but he just kind of deteriorated to the fight.
I think the perfect synopsis, what I took from it was, I don't know who was telling the story, but it was about how at the end of that gig, you guys had a weirdly good time. You were like, yeah, remember, like, it seems like that gig, we were like not fighting and it was a good night. And then at the end of the night, you had borrowed a van or some shit and the van broke down. Oh, no, you guys got pulled over for drink driving.
Yeah.
And then ended up just taking a cab home and leaving the van on the side of the road because nobody had a fucking license. That to me sounds like the Fall, because I've played shows with a more contemporary version of the Fall back in the day, and I remember no matter what, it was always a bit of a mess in the most perfect way. You know, like I've had bands that were similar where you're like, yeah, there was a fist fight on stage, and then somebody drank too much and got sick, but that's what you remember. You remember like standing in the rain on the side of the road at the end of the night. That's what tour is really like. You know?
Yeah, I mean, one of the most famous gigs ever by the Fall was documented, for better or for worse, but that was a Brownies show, which you might have seen the video from New York, where they're literally all fighting on stage, you know, and Carl Burns, I mean, it's like a comedy film. At one point, Carl Burns is trying to strangle Mark, and then Mark's trying to move the microphones from Steve's bass. So Steve's moving, so he can't get to the microphone, and then Mark bends over and Carl Burns kicks up the backside. I mean, it's like a comedy film. But that was the Fall. That was that lineup of the Fall just imploding, which was a great lineup, you know. So yeah, I mean, there has been talk of turning Steve's book into a film, but you know, whether that will happen or not, I don't know. It would be an interesting.
Who would play fucking Mark Smith though?
Yeah.
That's a tough one. Maybe Brad Pitt.
There's a guy called Chris Eccleston who might do a good job of it.
I'll fucking look this guy up right now. Chris Eccleston?
I know, I want to see.
But I mean, he'd have to play Mark in the. I don't know who would play the young Mark. I mean, there was somebody on Twitter the other day who went to school with Mark, and I've never heard really any stories of schoolhood Marky Smith. And what was he like? I mean, he was only 21 when I met him, but he still had the kind of attitude of an old man, really, in many ways. He really strange mindset about him. You know, I mean, he used to say things like, yeah, people don't have their own smell anymore. They bathe too much. And that was like when he was 21 years old, you know?
You see, he had a philosopher's heart.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what, weirdly?
Very kind way of putting it.
I agree with people not having their own smell, but I have a few friends who do very much have their own smell, and you can walk away with it on your shirt for free. You're like, it's like going into duty free, giving them a hug, and you get a free blast. You know?
But you've toured with a few of them.
Sorry. Yeah. You just said the passage in the John Cooper Clarke book that Paul Hanley sent me. No, I sent it to him, actually. Somebody sent it to me in the first place, where it said that John Cooper Clarke was in Australia and the promoter said to him, oh, we had the Fall here a couple of months ago. And he went, oh, right, what was it like? He said, yeah, it was great. He said, but I booked a table for all the band and just Mark turned up. And he said, no, I'm not invited them. They won't appreciate it. Just buy them a bag of chips and they'll be happy.
You could never have anything nice, Mr. Riley. Yeah.
Yeah, seemingly. But I wouldn't change a thing. I always say the second best thing to ever happen to me professionally was joining the Fall, but the best thing that ever happened to me was getting kicked out.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
That's it, really. But
what a pleasure. What a pleasure. Doing the record was really great. Thank you again, Mark. It was.
I know you've done a brilliant job. You and Matt have just really done a fantastic job on it, mate. So yeah, cheers.
Yeah.
Ching, ching.
Moving on to Castleface, I think it's like, asking firstly why you started it, because I mean, the simple story is that you did it to release your own music because no one else wanted to. Is that kind of true?
Yeah, that I would say it's a 50-50 mixture of nobody was banging down my door to put out stuff, but also I didn't want to give ownership of our music to anyone else. So we own all of our stuff, and that's how it's always been. And to this day, I've pretty much gotten back all my rights that were pre-Castleface releases. So the only thing I don't own is one 7-inch, I think, that we did on Sub Pop, who own it in the known universe for all eternity. So, but not anymore. I think it's important for people to own their musical rights. It's the only thing that Taylor Swift and I agree on, I think. But because of that, she has my respect.
I think she's supposed to have re-recorded that album in full, right? Gone back in to retain her rights.
Yeah, I'm curious. Well, I heard about that. This is really off topic, but
wait, who is this, Papa?
She's this American pop star.
Okay.
I love that you act like you don't know who Taylor Swift is.
Oh no, I just didn't hear you. Taylor Swift, I do know who that is.
You're like, love her.
Well, I would.
But I always wonder about people re-recording material. I wonder if she re-recorded it to sound exactly the same, or if it's a different adventure. Nathan, you're a fan. Do you know?
I have no idea. I only heard about the story recently, to be honest, and I thought that gets me a lot of it gets me a lot of respect to say, like, fuck you to the industry that's kind of been there, that's now taking the utter piss out of ethical remuneration of artists and all the streaming kind of platforms and shit like that.
Does she own her own label now? And if not, why the fuck doesn't she? She's fucking rich enough that she could. Anybody that has that kind of money, this is maybe, I'm not trying to defend the industry, but if you have that much money, then why the fuck wouldn't you be hiring on your own company to put out your shit? She would be able to keep all the money and all her rights, I mean, maybe I'm oversimplifying, which I'm sure I am. But at the same time, when I know successful bands who are having difficulties with management or with their record labels, my first thought is, well, fuck them. You don't need them, especially now. Like, you could put out so many bands I've known that I've recommended that they put out their own records right when they're at the top of their career, and none of them do, and continue to complain about management and these terrible, archaic record labels, like you said.
And that's
kind of fear having to do all the work themselves, all the behind the scenes.
They have the money. When we started out, we had no money. We had to get funding from a friend of ours who had money, and to this day, I'm sure I still owe him money. For fuck's sake, he doesn't speak to me anymore, so I have no idea. I'm kidding. We work together all the time, but yeah, I'm sure I owe him at least $50, if not more.
But I guess that's part of, like, people just not knowing or being, I wouldn't say it's lazy. I think fearful, of actually just saying, fuck it, we're going to do it ourselves. We're going to, actually go down the rabbit hole and own the rights and try and put some effort into it. But not only that, go on a journey of, like, what happens here, It could be a massive failure, but
it wouldn't
unless you try it.
I think they get.
You know what? I'm sorry. I think the first band to do it, might have been Simply Red. Bizarrely, I think
I found out I like them the other day. I didn't know. I like Simply Red.
Which song did it?
Well, I just went down the rabbit hole of listening to their early records, some of which were just like weird synth pop records, which were really not at all what I came to know from the Breakfast Club and their hits.
Yeah.
Their early stuff is kind of like their first two things are pretty far out. The name for some reason was always such a turnoff because I always associate it with like my redheaded stepbrother or something, So I think that we used We used to call him that to bust his balls when we were kids, so I always equated it with him. But you know.
Well, yeah, I mean, because he was Mick Hucknall used to be, his nickname was Squid at the time. I don't know why quite, but he was a singer in a band called the Fat Elevators who used to play with the Four a lot. So he's got a great voice, but yeah, I mean, it's not on my street really. But yeah, it's a pop band. But I think they were the first. You know, that Stars album was ginormous, and I think that was the one that maybe went and re-recorded and just ended up owning the rights and
no shit.
kind of setting the precedent.
Huh. Interesting.
So was your first release your own Coachwhips then? Was that
No,
was first? Or was it Pink and Brown?
It was
Sucks
no.
Blood,
It
right?
was those records were all put out by other labels initially. The first release was Sucks Blood, yeah, with Bridget, Patrick. No, was it Patrick? No, it
Patrick was on some of it, right?
Yeah, it was like a half and half. With the band was mixed up on that record, but it was Sucks Blood, which we recorded some of it with Kelly Stoltz, and some of it we recorded ourselves down at Club 6 on the 388. Or no, with Woodhouse maybe. Fuck, I can't even remember now. It's been so long.
I think it was all Kelly, that one.
No, the opening of the record is definitely recorded in Club 6 because I remember It Killed Mom was recorded there, I think.
Oh yeah, you're right.
You know what? I could be wrong though. Don't take this for truth. Never let the truth get in the way of a good yarn. But yeah, I think that was the first record, and that record was supposed to be put out by Kill Rock Stars, I think. And then they decided they didn't want to do vinyl, so I bailed on that. I was like, a CD I have no interest in. The CD to me is for promotional purposes only at this point. And then, which is kind of rude to some people, I'm sure, but we still make them for you too. But then I think Sub Pop was going to pick it up, and then they decided not to. There was somebody at the label didn't like the band, which is totally understandable. And then at that point, I was like, fuck it, let's just do it ourselves because then we can own it. And it worked. You know, it took a minute to get off the ground. But now I'm so glad we did. I would never go back. You know, I still work with other labels occasionally, but they're friends of mine who I like their work. But I really love working with Matt and having. If I didn't have Matt, the label wouldn't exist. He's the guy that actually is there, turning the screwdriver and driving the car. I merely just throw shit at him all day and bury him in work. So.
What was the second piece of shit you threw at him, as you might call it?
Fuck. Second thing Castleface put out. That's a good question. I know early on it was Ty's first record. Was maybe one of the first things. Shit. You know what? Let's look that up because I have no idea.
It was like Warm Slime. Did we come back to it maybe. For OSEES maybe?
002. Let's look it up. Castleface 02 was Ty Segall. Yeah. It was Ty's first record, I believe. That record right there, yeah. Sold out. Yeah, look at that. He's doing quite well for himself, isn't he?
He is. He's doing pretty well so far, you know. And
the kid's all right.
Little Ty.
I mean, I think he, you know, if you look at it and you go, quite the work ethic of Ty. I've got to say, you know, some of it's got to come from the influences of you guys in those early kind of days. It's you know, even the output, I'm not talking musically, but just the constant output of Ty as well, and how he's jumping about from, you know, all the other projects that he does. It's very much reminiscent of not you, but a lot of the scene that comes from that, you know, and that's kind of, I guess it's passing on to the next generation a little bit, you know.
He definitely works as much as I do. I think I mean, for me, it's a way of keeping the wolf from the door, you know, like working and writing music and making art and staying busy is a way for me to stay happy, you know, like I would, you know, a lot of the people on our label the same way, like Tim Presley's another example of somebody who's constantly putting shit out. You know?
In everybody's band as well, you know, with Tim and stuff like that. And I think that this is what I look at this, you know, if I look at this roster, and I've put mostly artists on here, from OBM Freeze to, you know, where you talk about male gaze, and, you know, the one band that I've got on a bucket list, I'll completely honest, is Eddie Current. I'm like,
so good.
Yeah,
they're the ones who I'm like, they need to come to Europe and play, but
I wouldn't be surprised. I got the impression those guys kind of broke up, and then they surprised us by giving us a record out of the fucking blue. I didn't even know they were recording that. They really brought it to us pretty much a finished product. And suddenly, I think Mikey Young always has his fingers in some projects, and I think he was excited again, and I think he would be the one to pull them together, So it's a possibility, I've talked to him about it, and to me, you have to approach Mikey really delicately because he's very easy to chase away. He's like a deer in the woods, I can't be myself rolling up on him really aggressively. I have to realize it's Mikey, so I approach him in a way. And with that, if to get an answer on that, you'd have to hint around it, beat around the bush quite a bit. You'd be like, it'd be really great.
So do you know what would be really great if I'm going to hint it? If Bob asked you to help on La Guess Who again, and then you can hint at Mikey, and we can hint at a good. I can hint at a fucking great venue in Leeds that he can come and hint about.
Bob is very subtle as well. I do believe that we were trying to. I'm sure that Total Control and Eddie Current were on the list of things that were my dream to get over. But fuck, it feels like it was 5 years ago now, so I can't remember. Mark, you're a fan, yeah?
A fan of
Eddie Current Suppression Ring?
No, yeah, I heard the name fly by. I don't know them.
Oh, you would fucking love it.
Yeah.
Man, that record, the first one with primary colours and stuff like that, is fucking incredible. That's one of my favourite albums when you just, colour television.
It's super Aussie punk, very primal, simple sounding stuff. I think it'd be up your alley, Mark. I'll send you some.
What year is it from? What's the kind of era? Is it?
They were on Goner, I think, initially, and it was probably 2008,
9
or so. Yeah, they came and played a bunch of shows through the States, and it was fucking great.
If you kind of look at a lot of the Aussie stuff that's come through in the last 5, 6, 7 years, that you can clearly see that a lot of that other stuff has come from that scene of even people like Rolling Blackouts and stuff like that now that are clearly influenced by.
Have you heard XX? Yeah, fantastic. I really we just did a reissue. XX is great. We just did a reissue for them, and their new record is just fucking phenomenal. I love that band. They're a great Aussie band.
I'm gonna ask about Damaged Bug, because you brought out that record last year, the Bug on Yonkers, right?
Oh yeah.
That's a phenomenal record, and this is this might be a project that a lot of people who are listening who are not OSEES fans especially or into that kind of might not have scratched beneath the surface. And it's got the vibe, but it's a synth-based kind of project. So, what about Damaged Bug, right? And actually, Barry sent me a question saying, "Can we have a Damaged Bug tour?"
I would love to. I think in my mind, Damaged Bug, I would just get to sing. But the reality with those songs is, as simple as they sound, it would require quite a bit of learning. And I do them all on an 8-track, so that means usually all 8 tracks are full, so it's kind of a lot going on in there. But I would like to do it. I would love to just sing. Can't tell if I'm too old for that or not now, just to stand there with a microphone. We'll see. But I would like to, but I just don't know if it's in the cards or not. To learn all that would be quite an endeavor. Aside from OSEES.
It's an amazing album. It really. I mean, I guess. Yeah. Sorry. Go on, Bridge.
I would love to see Damaged Bug too. The album with What Cheer and Jet and Jungle, even that album, I'd love to see that.
It'd be fun. I would probably have to strip it down to one drummer.
Yeah.
Oh Lord. Yeah. 5 drummers, just drums and me singing. Everybody would.
That's just the evolution of the band right now, right?
Yeah. It's headed that way. There's definitely a blurred line,
Someone asked us what current name is the band going under right now?
Oh, it's YOURMA. Yeah.
OSEES.
Yeah. Yourselves, yeah.
Did they grab that question out of the hat of questions I get asked every fucking?
Oh, I mean, that's one of the ones that come up and you're just like, okay,
yeah.
Carry on.
That's the great thing about you owning your own label, John, because if you're on another record label, they would bollock you severely for changing your name every 6 months, wouldn't they?
I can tell you this: Revolver, our distributor, and Kip, our PR guy, definitely have been run through the gamut, and I've twisted them through the mangler so many times that they're completely fucking used to it now. Like, they don't even give a shit. Like, if I were to change the name again, Revolver would just be like this. Okay. Like, they're just like, whatever, dude. They won't even argue with me anymore.
I'm gonna share something, right, that I thought were quite funny. I'm gonna stop sharing the screen for a second, and I'm gonna share a quote from Sam. I don't know if you've seen it before. That talks about
Sam who?
Sam Fromler. How do you say his name?
Oh, Sam, our sound guy.
Yeah, from okay. Sam, your sound guy, right? Who he ain't just your sound guy. Sam is your sound guy, your driver, your backline tech. He is like, yeah, and you know when
you know what his nickname is?
No.
Cupcake. Because he's so sweet.
I mean, he was the guy that I remember the last show we did. He had to get in the train. He lost his passport or some shit on that tour, yeah. And he missed the Brighton show or something like that, and he had to get the train up to Leeds on it.
Yeah, we made fun of him relentlessly for that. Yeah.
But I'm trying to find on here where he talks about you. And
oh fuck, I'm scared now.
It's quite.
He's out doing unauthorized interviews.
Unauthorized interviews. So here, I mean, he talks about Ty here, right? You know, saying that how he's, you know, down to earth and great. But you, I mean, you know, you're really demanding and a little cranky. And but yeah, I thought I'd just share that with you, you know. But it's kind of like Sam is the best, right?
He is.
Sam's the person that I honestly, I do not know another band that can come to a show and we say we're not going to get there until 7 o'clock, and you're like, what about the sound check? What about the setting up of the band? And they're like, don't worry about it, you know. And I remember that the show, we did it in the university, right? And you were like, we're going to get there on time. You turned up, you just put it on the side of the stage, and kit. And it was like 20 minutes before stage time. And you're just like, fuck it, we're going to set it up and just play. And Sammy's the best at just like miking, EQing, getting it going on time. I've never seen a machine like work with a band in that way, and credit to him, you know.
We're always late because nobody wants to wake up at fucking 6 a.m.
That's right.
And then spend 5 hours at a club. Not your club, mind you, but just any club. Just that lifestyle doesn't suit us to have slept for 1 hour. I was like, if you want us to be in a terrible mood and to show up and play terribly, then that's the fucking way to do it, you know. So we just take our time.
You did that for many years without any Sammy around either, right?
Oh, yeah. We put in our time showing up on time, and we opt not to now. We still try.
We really small crew, haven't you?
Yeah. It's just us and one guy.
I mean, that's the thing. Watching you play, I've been lucky enough to like DJ before you, and I've seen you quite a lot over the last few years. But you just drag all your gear on, you just tootle about a bit, and then you just start playing along, looking at each other, and the next minute you start. It's like it's a great thing to see, because people are wondering what's going on. You know, it's not the typical way, is it? You know, you've hardly got somebody coming on introducing you. It's like, there's a band, they're setting up the gear, and in about a quarter of an hour they'll be picking up speed and then into it.
I think the key to not having to wake up at 6 a.m. is routing. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't pay attention to. So you don't want to have to drive for 12 hours to get to a fucking show. So it really comes down to paying attention to what the booker's doing and making demands of them. So often we try and keep our drives around 5-6 hours tops. That way we can not have to wake up early and still potentially get there in time.
I mean, keeping a track on Buzz, that's a fucking, you know, Buzz and John together. Great people, but Come
like
on.
trying to hold a box of feathers in a windstorm. that man is like electricity. Yeah. If you don't keep track of Buzz's booking, we'll be driving back and forth across France for a month straight, just zigzagging. There's no sort of thing as a concentric circling around France in a spiral to get to Paris. And, you know.
God.
That's the weird thing for us, you know, particularly with the show, because like if somebody's playing, say, Brighton one day, and then they're playing Glasgow the next, and then they're coming back to us in Manchester, and then they're going back to Aberdeen, and I'll look at it, and I always feel guilty about this because there might be like a 4 or 5 hour drive, and the British bands, to be honest, are a bit like, oh no, it's cool, but the American bands are like 5 hours. I'll do that with my eyes shut. You know, obviously it's a different thing, isn't it? Completely. I feel really guilty if a band does a 7 hour journey to do a session, but the American bands, it's just, yeah, it's like going to the next city, isn't it? It's easy.
It is kind of, yeah.
So do you know when you're talking about setup and stuff like that? I'll go back onto Castleface shortly, but what's your kind of? I don't want to be critical here, but I've got to admire the way that raw energy of rocking up, setting up, and pressing go right on a show. It's raw, it's real, it's the way that things, you know, when a band starts out in its infancy, it's still like that with your projects. You know, it hasn't suddenly got a video wall and fucking silly production and shit like that. And I think what I'm trying to get at is it's the real connection between kind of not just musicians on stage, and it's a true kind of working together, but connection between the crowd and the audience as well. You know, like, listen, this is it. This is how we are. This is who we are. And this is what you're going to get straight up. No holds barred, no bullshit, no hiding behind, you know, fancy gimmicks or shit like that. It's real kind of honest music.
It's always been good to keep it very simple for everything that I do, you know, like simple is best. And that's, you know, that's why we have such a small crew. That's why Sam is so overworked and he thinks I'm cranky. You know, just we use all of our tools, I think, really well and to their fullest extent. But we also keep, like, everybody in my band is really good at doing what they do. They're all fantastic musicians, fantastic improvisers. Sam can do anything. Like, if you're like
later on in that interview, though, he goes on to say great things. So I'm going to stick up for him.
No, sorry, I'm going to kick his ass. I would be the first one to agree with everything he said. And yeah, me and Sam, we go way back now. And it was funny because I'm really reluctant to take on new people always. Like, I find the people I like and I stick with them. So I think the first time Sam came out with us, I remember griping to Buzz, being like, I don't know, a new guy. And within 24 hours, okay, so here's what happened the first 2 days Sam was with us. He didn't want to do sound. He was like, I'm going to go stand out in the middle of the crowd and just watch the show to get a sense of the band. And I was like, okay, that makes sense, you know, interesting concept. So he goes out and stands in the crowd, and he's like this ginger French guy, just crossed arms, standing in the middle of the crowd with like Terminator sunglasses, like contractor's glasses on, just like an asshole. So I'm watching him while we're playing. I never look out in the crowd, but the whole time I keep focusing, and I'm seeing this guy that we're with just standing in the middle, like in a mosh pit, you know, just standing still.
He's quite a big guy as well, right?
He's not a little dude. So then the next night I was like, are you ready to do sound? And he's like, no, I'm going to take one more day and watch. And I was like, okay. So now I'm getting a little bit like, the fuck's this guy doing? That day, same thing, just out in the crowd with, you know, he's fucking out there standing in the middle of the crowd, like watching us play, you know. And then the next night I was like, are you ready to do sound? He's like, now I'm ready. And since that day, he's been our sound guy. I even fly him over to the States to do our US tours. He is without a doubt the best sound person I've ever worked with, and he's basically a member of the band. You know, he can fix your amp like during sound check. He'll be back there getting electrocuted while you're sound checking. You know, he's got some balls.
Yeah. So I thought it's nice to just bring Sam in, because there's people like that in the background that you know, people watching never ever, they don't realize how important they are.
Did you see the shirt we made of him?
No.
No.
We made it's just a picture of his face where he's like and it says Sam the Sound Guy on top and on bottom of it, and we put them in our merch table, and we sold all of them. Yeah, I think we sold them entirely to other sound people. Like other people that worked at the club be like, I'll take fucking 6 of those, you know. Like,
are you sure Sam didn't buy them? Just hide them away.
He's he was looking heavier because he was wearing them all at once at the end of the shows. But yeah, they all sold. So you know.
So yeah, going back onto like you know, some of the stuff on the label. Any kind of notable stories and things like that, or anything you'd want to bring up about any of the artists on the label?
Endlessly, you know, we've got some great new people we're working with there. We've got Kai. They put together a fantastic record. I'm looking forward to Bridget doing some touring that I have nothing to do with. I really want to see Bridget out there bushwhacking and fending for herself. Population 2, a Canadian band, a Quebecois band, French Canadian, who are fucking fantastic live. We have the XX reissues coming up. We have a couple things that I can't really talk about because they haven't been announced yet, but there's a couple little more reissue-y things that we have coming up this year that I'm really excited about. Some sort of stuff that some bands from back in the day that sort of went under the radar and really surprised me as such. Mark, I'll fill you in on this later.
Great.
But basically, we're just looking forward right now. Everything is going good, though. Our fans have really saved us this year with mail order. I feel like the label did okay because we have great fucking fans and people are hungry for music. That's why I put out 10 records last year like an asshole. Was I figured if there was ever a time I could get away with doing what I would do all the time if I had the opportunity to, which was just to record nonstop. But yeah, we have a lot of good things coming up, and I have nothing but faith in everything that we've put out over the years. You know,
I've got to say the Blind Shake were like one of the incredible, powerful, instant bands that I saw, and just thought, fucking a connection on the drums.
How the fuck were they not huge? And also, it's so sad to think that they're not playing anymore. Every time I think about that, I get a little depressed. But they just moved on and they're doing other projects now. But man, what a unit, you know. I think what happened.
Yeah.
A lot of them had kids and stuff, and it gets a bit tougher to get back out. But I can tell you what, I've really pestered them about doing reunions to the point where I don't think they want to respond to my texts anymore.
Did the drummer have a baby? So the drummer had a baby, and so he left. And then they got another drummer in, and they did this. They put this British tour. I'm sure they were coming to you now. And
they were. It was the night that mine was the night after they broke up, and yeah. I mean that no, there was some physical altercations and stuff, right?
They were also traveling at that time. I think it was a difficult all-around thing where they were traveling with a guy who had recently fallen off the wagon and disappeared for long stretches of time. And one of the guys in that band was a recovering addict, so it was adding extra stress. And it was just like a lot. So, but also that all that put in perspective for me was that their first drummer, Dave, was kind of the perfect thing for them. Like he was such a nice guy and such a good drummer, but the fact that he had to leave was really tough on them. I think, you know, they were like 3 brothers. The funny thing was they were all fucking bald, and then when Dave left the band, he grew his hair back, and I never knew he had a head of hair under there. He had just been shaving his head with the brothers, and I was like, "Fuck, look at that beautiful head of hair." And he's like, "Oh, I have a fantastic head of hair." So.
I never did.
The story I heard was that he actually, the band were touring, and the new drummer and the tour manager fell out, so they both decided to leave. Why one of them just didn't leave, I will never understand.
They were the guys that were struggling. The only reason I would even tell this story is because their tour manager guy was the guy who fell off the wagon, and he also fucked us over on that because he was supposed to deliver a van full of our gear for us and didn't show up. And had disappeared, and basically we were a cunt hair away from calling the police and saying the van had been stolen. Right away, I knew what it was. I was like, "This guy's doing dope," and everybody's like, "No," because he was a real kind of straight-seeming dude, but everything smacked of he's gone on a binge. And then, sure enough, the dudes who owned the van went and found him, and they're like, "Oh, yep, same. You know, he's doing fine now." But it was one of those things where I was like, "Fuck, man!" Like, so I think he kind of really took a shit on their last tour there.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, he had his demons, right? But he's deep down, He's a good guy at heart. He just had his demons.
I actually do like the guy, but I told him in the end, I was like, you shouldn't do this job. I was like, you can't do a job where people are relying on you if you might slip up and disappear, you know? And it's like, with what he was, what his addictions were, it's a miracle that he's okay, because I know a lot of people that have been down that path, so many, and a lot of them are dead or still addicts that are like, you know, chipping away at their lives really slowly. It's a tough one, you know?
But yeah, what happened after that was they turned up at the Broodnell, because that was the night before, and they had two people in the band, no drummer and no tour manager, and it was like, what are you going to play? And they ended up playing a set and getting through it and working it, and you know, everybody thought, fucking hell, this is still incredible. So they're a bit of a complete anomaly band that I don't know another band that could get on and do that, you know.
They're great. They're very talented and great guys, and they got huge sets of balls for being like, we're not going to go home. Fuck that, you know.
Yeah.
We actually did a session for us that same night, and then went over to you, as I remember.
Okay. Yeah. They. That's why I'm so sad to see that they're not out there playing as much. You know? I have a feeling we might see them again, though. I'm going to continue to bug them until they've completely blocked me. So,
have you ever felt
the drum all the time with his tongue out, didn't he?
What's that? Yeah. He was a big fan, I think, of Craig, who used to drum for Arab on Radar. You could really see this guy from my hometown style in his, but he wasn't aping him. It was just this really like sort of weird homage to me.
Right.
have you ever thought about doing a Castleface festival, or I'm sure someone's asked you to do it before?
Well, to get into the can of worms of festival booking, one of the things I always told Barry Hogan was, why the fuck do you book festivals? It seems like such a thankless job, you know, like you said earlier, people don't see the people like the sound person or the promoter. Not that they're all angels, but you know what I mean? Like, people sometimes take for granted things like a festival, especially a smaller festival, something like ATP or any of that, how much fucking work it is and how easy it is to fuck it up. I would never, ever myself want to book a festival. No fucking way. Like, that job to me would be like wanting to be a cop. I'd be like, no, I'm good. You know, like, I'd rather I'm fine with playing a festival, but I wouldn't want to run the logistics of that, or the hope that we sell enough tickets, or that fucking weather is, you know, beneficial. So,
yeah,
I think when you talk,
didn't you, John? So you had the Castlemania bill, but that was during the Beast.
That was Matt Jones. Matt Jones did that. And they were small shows, you know what I mean? Like, they were every now and then Matt would do something at South by Southwest, or that show in London where it was it was feasible because it was simple, you know. But to do something like a yearly festival where you're expecting thousands of people without having like Golden Voice behind you or something, no fucking way. And also, like, if things go really well, nobody knows your fucking name. If things go poorly, everybody knows your name. It's like a real it just never was appealing to me. Do
you mean like Barry? How?
Yeah, exactly,
you know.
like Barry. Exactly like Barry.
But I've got, you know, for everything that anyone wants to say about ATP or when it didn't happen or whatever, I've got to personally say, you know, the influence that the artists he got to reform, to come and play, to bring over our venue, and venues like ours, and promoters around the country, and other bands that have come along way after that, probably wouldn't exist. You know, the way that you know, I went to an ATP personally, saw some bands that you just wouldn't see, and then picked up and thought, I need to bring that to my venue. I need to put that on, and they link you on to other stuff, and then you meet the other people. It's like going down the crazy rabbit hole, you know, picking the red or the blue pill. And Barry was the right pill right there. You know what I mean?
He is such a pill too.
he's probably watching. But what I'm saying is, you know, but what I'm saying is, there's a. If you speak to the guys from Mogwai, if you speak to Jeff Barrow from Beacon Portishead, if you speak to the people who know the background about what that tastemaker and influence and stuff like that is, and when you're talking about the things in the background, money can't buy that shit, you know. Money can't give you that what the influence.
ATP was a fantastic festival. We always said yes. We always got paid, and I know that wasn't always the case for everybody, but I have no complaints. Barry has always been real square with me, and those festivals were curated really fantastically. And I know that I've been to other festivals that are sort of, that were inspired by that.
Mimicking.
What's that?
Mimicking in some ways.
Just, you know, had taken that model and ran with it, but would probably never admit it because of, you know, bad press or whatever the fuck had happened. But it's irrelevant because I know what I took from it, and I always had a fantastic time. I loved those weird English holiday camps. You know, I have a million fucking stories from those. That's exactly what I'm talking about. It was the festival that transcended the blandness of typical festival life. Where I actually enjoyed being there, and I remember it, and I took away memories that I'll cherish. You know,
far more musically interesting than.
Yeah, absolutely. I would have never have seen fucking De La Soul play if it wasn't for fucking ATP. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then at the end of
at one of those ATPs that we were just standing there like, he was beautiful, you know.
We played in Iceland with The Fall, Mark.
That's right.
After your time, but it was like a really, you know, they played for like maybe 30 minutes, and then Mark Smith offered me cocaine at 2 p.m, and I was like, no, thank you, but great show, you know. But it was just like, the likelihood of me going to places like Iceland is non-existent, otherwise, you know. So I don't take it for granted, you know.
But it seems something like
it was the first time I saw you was at the Betheli. I think it might have been the last ATP. I can't remember, but that was the first time I saw you playing live, and that was one of the most exciting things I've ever seen in my life. It was just mind-blowing.
You drank a bunch of beers at ATPs over the years. Me and you have had a pint at an ATP. We've had a drink together at an ATP. You know,
we have, that one.
This is why we're friends now. You know, because of that.
But those ATPs, right, were the only place you could see, for example, The Fall, followed by Godspeed, followed by the bootleg Beatles, right? Yep. And you'd end up having a party at late at night, drinking fucking blueberry cider, you know, blue cider, when everyone's got blue lips walking around and stuff like that. You know, while there's things going on in the background that you shouldn't really speak about at the same time. It was a law unto itself, you know, but it was the most magical. If you're into alternative music, it was the most magical kind of place to go and experience.
Hey, tell me something. Why aren't they making a fucking movie about this? Should be like Avengers 5 ATP or some shit. Barry.
After I saw you play that. After I saw you play that night, John, I had a few, and I was going back to the chalet with my mate. And there's about 3 chalets down from us. There was the band. It was members of the band Toy, but there was loads and loads of people on the grass. And there was one of them, a really great guy out of Toy called Panda, and he was skating across the mud on an ironing board. So, And it was 2 o'clock in the morning, and I just went, "Panda, behave yourself!" And he just shouted back, "Sorry, Mr. Riley," and got off and put it back. It was like I was like the caretaker of the chalets, you know, going around keeping all these young kids in check. It was great. And the only place to eat, as I remember, was a fish and chip shop.
Yeah, I remember that fucking fish and chip shop. It saved my life, I think.
Yeah,
everybody.
Just to say. Sorry.
ATP has changed my definition of what chalet means. I remember they were like, "Welcome to the chalet, where you're going to sleep in this orphanage bed next to your snoring fucking bandmate." I was like, "Chalet?"
I think there were like rubber mats on the bed for sure, right?
Yeah, because of your problem.
Come on.
Sorry.
I'm
just kidding.
You're for it, John, when she sees you next.
Yeah. I'll sort that.
In a kind of a reminiscence thing, has Christine still got the shop in San Francisco? Do you know or anything?
Yeah, she's doing well, man. She's her shop has expanded. She's exactly like you remember her. You know, like that trip that she did with us. She's still exactly like that. She'll sometimes I'll get a text from her in the middle of the night, and I'll be like, "Yep, she's wasted." Just like ridiculous, like sort of fantastical ideas or whatever. She's always doing something like.
They were doing shows in the basement, right?
Yeah,
well.
Yeah, they're great.
She doesn't have the basement anymore, but we recorded a lot of those live San Francisco Castleface records in her basement. was
Amplified Heat.
Amplified Heat one didn't come out. It didn't work out, unfortunately.
Oh,
But
no.
Useless Eaters was recorded. Useless Eaters was recorded down there. The Intelligence one, where Lars is choking his drummer with a belt. That one's down there. That was, and all those nights were so fun. Those
Destruction Unit or anything?
Destruction Unit was recorded half there and then half at a venue in LA, and both those shows were fucking catastrophes.
That live Destruction Unit record's fucking great though, man. It's raging.
The reason for the live records for the most part were because a lot of those bands, for instance, Blind Shake is the perfect example. Although no, maybe not. But they just, some bands just have a different sheen on them live than they do in the studio, and a lot of the times it's more punk, it's more raw. So to record a really simplistic, blistering version of them live was sort of the idea, to be like, okay, let's just get like a really rough, awesome bootleg of this fucking band, because when they're in the studio they tend to play everything perfectly and right, or just it has a different polish on it. So in particular, Destruction Unit was one of those bands that sounded, I thought, so I really like their records too, don't get me wrong, but live I was like, fuck, like I want to hear this. The same way with Total Control. We tried to do one for Total Control.
That's what I was thinking of.
But trying to get 6 of those guys to agree on anything is like being at the UN table or something, so it just didn't pan out. But Total Control's records are these masterpieces in one light, and then you get them live, and it's like this, just somehow more punk live, It's like really like proto-punk. So,
that's one of my favorite bands that we ever toured with.
Oh yeah,
just
what a bunch of nice guys too,
Yeah, but musically,
a real sausage party too.
That's true. Yeah. It was always a sausage party.
Lots of blokes there, Bridge. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I know.
In kind of just to kind of come on, is there any music that you've done in this period that you're allowed? I mean, it's up to you if you tell us about it. Is there out that you've recorded that's new, that's going to come out, or?
Yeah, I mean, I have more improv projects I've been working on, which have been kind of a pleasure, because the thing that they do right now that's versus OSEES is that they provide, you don't have to really rehearse for those. So we can get together and do a short week-long session at my studio and just hang out, come upstairs, have a cup of tea, go back down. It's not like OSEES is like a machine. So when we go in and write, we would go in and write every day, and we're spending a lot of time together. Obviously with COVID, it changed things drastically in respect to that. So with the improv projects, I can bring in people one at a time, or we can have a few people just improvising at once. So I've been doing a lot of those sort of like far out things. And then I have still slowly chipping away at the Damaged Bug new record, which I've been recording for 3 years. I actually stopped doing that and did the Michael Younker's cover record with Bridget and Nick Murray and whatnot as a break from working on this other record that I had hit a roadblock on. But I have like 40 songs recorded that none of them are finished. So someday I will get back in there and work on that. And then I have another project I'm working on at home that is me learning a new skill, which I can't really reveal yet, but that's been a really time-consuming thing. Basically right now, the only thing to do is to make sure that you don't have idle hands, or if you're going to do that, then be the laziest you've ever been in your life for this year and just watch TV for a year, like there's no proper way to do this. I don't have any answers. So
you were telling me that new skills like computer games, right?
No, that's an old skill that I've been rehoning, though. Yeah, I have been playing a lot of,
You learning to play the harp, John?
What's that?
You learning to play the harp?
Fuck, I wish. I did look into how much a real harp costs. They're like $80,000. So that skill went. Yeah, they're fucking expensive. That one Joanna Newsom plays, that thing's no joke. That's like orchestral. Those are expensive instruments. They're like $20,000 for a low end one. But I have yes.
Really great woman in
I have priced harp, Mark.
Yeah. No, I had this woman in called Serafina Steer, and she plays the harp, and she's great. She plays with Jarvis Cocker as well, and a band called Bastian. She's great. But she came in and played for me years ago, and she was telling me that a car was stolen with the harp in it. And the harp was worth more than the car. Yeah. But what we were wondering is, can you imagine somebody wandering around all the pubs in London trying to sell a harp that they're just stolen? It's like, it's not the easiest thing to offload, is it?
I'm wondering if they stole the car simply because it's such a pain in the ass to move a harp, so they figured rather than just steal it, they take the whole fucking car, It's like a
probably. Yeah, probably.
Yeah. Interesting.
Do you know Mary Latimer?
I know that name.
Yeah, she's played with a load of other bands and a load of like alternative rock bands as well. Harp on there. She's pretty amazing. Her and Meg Baird released a couple of albums that are pretty great. You should check out Mary Latimer and Meg Baird's album.
Okay. Did we go see them at Zebulon together?
I haven't seen a harpist play at Zebulon, I don't think. That name sounds really familiar.
We saw Meg Baird with another woman she was playing with.
I don't remember a harp. I did see Anthony Braxton play here about a year and a couple months ago at the Broad Museum with a harpist who I don't think was her, but she was fucking incredible. It was just Anthony Braxton too, who's like 90 now. That dude never has passed the torch in terms of, I mean, he's never like shifted gears. He's still as out there as he ever was, and that show's fucking unbelievable. Harp and soprano saxophone. As weird as it could have. Really, I was a little bit floored by it, and he looks like he looks amazing now. He's got gray hair. He just crushed it. Yeah, and she was amazing as well. Yeah.
So, any questions that you want to ask or you want to ask Bridget? There's a couple that you were gonna throw in out here.
I know. So, John, last night when you called me, I had to pretend I didn't know anything about all of this, and I'm so proud of myself. When I got off the phone with you, I was like, I did it. But they had asked me for questions, but they were gonna like go. So we have some questions from Bridget Dawson, currently living on the south coast of England. Blah blah blah. Anyway, and my questions were kind of lame, but I was gonna ask you, what was the best laugh that we ever had on tour together?
Well, I can think of a couple that I can't mention here. One in particular with Barry, where I still laugh about it. But okay, no, I get the perfect one. That's family friendly. Where me and Bridget were in Oslo together. We had played an outdoor show. We were with Archie, our friend from the band Blowy, and our whole band. And it was right when the students had graduated high school. So everybody's wearing those fucking sailor hats and they're partying. And it's like this, the sun hadn't gone down. So it was like 11 p.m. and it was still bright out. And I just wasn't in the mood anymore. Like we had a bunch of drinks and I'd already been drunk. And then I was sober again. So I just feel like shit. And I was like, you know what? We got to get back to this house. And you were like, I want to go too. So we just started walking. We had a map that the girl that we were with had drawn for us that was drawn on like a wet napkin. And of course, Oslo kind of all looks the same. So we got lost immediately. We didn't have any cell phones. This was that long ago. Or we had no reception maybe. But either way, we were completely fucking lost. We don't speak the language. We're both exhausted and hungover. And it's starting to get dark out finally. And you're like, you know what? Let me go into this shop on the corner. And it was a shop that was on the corner of two streets that had, it was like a 2,000-year-old looking building with like marble steps coming down on the corner that had been worn down smooth by people walking up and down them for fucking centuries. She's like, I'm going to go in this shop and ask this guy if he knows where the fuck this house is because we got to get there. And finally I was like, okay. So I'm outside waiting for her. And as she's walking up the steps, this Norwegian man in like little slip-on fancy shoes came out the door of the I know I'm making him sound ridiculous, but he just looked ridiculous. Came out the door of this corner shop and then just beefed on the stairs and fell all the way down the staircase and slid on his ass because the stairs were so smooth. He was fine, but he made such a show of trying to get purchase on the handrail that people just started laughing right in his face. Like it was such a like a mood break. Like we had been so bummed out, and then this man just slid on his ass all the way down the staircase in front of us that we had to run away from him because we split
and went around the block because we were laughing so hard we couldn't look at each other.
What an American dick move. But I could hear her laughter bouncing off the buildings as I ran the other way because we were trying to hide that we were laughing at the guy who had just really fallen pretty hard. And then we laughed even harder because you said that he had beefed. You're like, okay. And I think we laughed about that for 2 days. Like I was laying in bed later that night just kind of giggling at that man just like all the way down the steps.
That was a good one.
That was a good night. We found the house.
We did, and miraculously. We didn't have cell phones then, John. We totally found it with the map.
It was like a blown out old apartment complex that looked like it was an extra set from a Tarkovsky film. From whenever there was like a dripping ceiling and like peeling wallpaper and stuff.
It was beautiful. Yeah. Weirdly. Yeah.
Any other questions, Bridget?
No, the other one is too silly, so I'm good. That's good.
I tell you what, I really wanted to ask as well, or what one of the staff here wanted to ask really was, why Duds as the first kind of UK band?
Why
Duds.
what?
Duds.
Why were
On
they? Why?
Yeah, yeah.
We can thank Mark Riley for that one, I believe. Yeah, Mark, you turned me on to the Duds, didn't you?
Yeah, funnily enough, again, it was one of those happy accidents. But I sent you the album, the stuff they recorded at that point, just hoping that they might be able to open for you in Manchester.
Yeah, I mean, I love that kind of post-punk poppy stuff. There's all the, they had a bit of fall on them as well. I think I dug the band, and they were really nice guys. I remember when I met them, there were way many more of them than I expected. There were like fucking 9 of those guys. But
I tell you, they were really big on, John. They were really, really big on and inspired by Useless Eaters.
Oh yeah, Useless Eaters. That makes sense. Yeah, very like one guitar string, guitar line, stuff like that. Like really primal, and also maybe a bit like that kind of like Crack Cloud school of really cool angular rock, but like dancey, kind of like a little bit disco punky. I'm always a sucker for. I mean, I like the Rapture. I loved that era of like early 2000s kind of like disco punk and like sort of like proto punk synth punk kind of shit. So that stuff always appeals to me. That's why I fucking love Crack Cloud. You know that band, guys, from Vancouver.
They played for us. They were supposed to be coming back up. They've played a session, right, Mark, as well?
They did 2 sessions for me, and once whilst I was on a holiday. But the last session that they did for me, they were in London, and they were pretty obtuse, and they didn't play ball at all, which is fine. But I'd done a load of research on them beforehand because I'd been to Canada about a few months before, and been through what they work in, the situations they work in Vancouver with the addicts and everything, which was really harrowing. And I admire those people so much. So I'd done a load of research, and then they just kind of refused to talk to me. But the funny thing, which was fine. But it was funny.
They're very friendly, but I wouldn't describe them as outwardly warm out of the gate. It takes a minute, I think they've seen quite a bit, those guys, and also there's a lot of them. That's another band where there's like 9. They have like a rotating cast, I think, of like a dozen.
They've got the other band Novel as well.
Yeah. Who sounds very similar.
I've got their new tune today, actually, Novel, and that's great. But the funny thing was, the singer, I got an email about half an hour after Crack Cloud had finished. And it was from this brother of the singer, I think it was. And he said, I've just been in touch with my brother and told him he's been an asshole. And he went, yeah, it wasn't so good, was it? So, but it was, I just resented the fact that I put about 90 minutes in just researching. They had loads of great questions all about the band and Vancouver and the work they did. And they were just like, no, you're all right, mate. So,
you know what? If you want, we can do another one of these where you ask me the questions and I'll answer as if I was outward worker in Vancouver.
No, you're okay. You're okay, mate.
I don't want your research to go to waste, mate.
Mark, have you got any kind of questions for John before we kind of hit the 2-hour mark and give him a rest? And give everyone a rest?
I've been holding in a piss this whole time, so yeah.
Let it go, John. Well, do you know, obviously we talked about Michael Yonkers, and did you hear the Ty Segall Segall Schmeagol recording?
No, I saw it. I haven't heard it, but I love Nilsson, obviously.
It's great. I tell you, the weird thing is, I actually pressed up. I got, with Ty's permission, I pressed up 5 copies, I think it was, of a 10-inch version of Segall Schmeagol. So it's him doing, obviously, Nielsen Schmielsen. And Bridget's got one.
I do.
And Ty's got one. But if you want, if you give me your address, I'll send you this 10-inch clear vinyl of it. Because it never came out on vinyl. It was only on Bandcamp. So I got in touch with Ty.
And I said, on vinyl? Oh, that's got to be fucking happening. But yeah, I want that. That surprises me. That surprises me.
Well, if you were to do a similar thing, I know you've done Michael Yonkers, but if you were to do a similar thing to that now, which artist would you choose?
If I was going to do another covers record?
Yeah. Who else would be on the list?
I don't normally do covers all that much, so I don't know. That's a good question. I'll have to think about that. I will tell you this, though. I always like this story, and it's really fast. Kelly Stoltz went to go see Randy Newman play at Amoeba in San Francisco years ago. And he walked up afterwards. There was a meet and greet with Randy Newman, who I fucking love, short people, everything.
Yeah, yeah.
And he walked up with the Newman does Nilsson does Newman, the Harry Nilsson's covers record. And he was like, "Hey, will you sign this for me?" And I guess Randy Newman was like, "Oh, you signed it for him?" But he was like, "This fucking guy." And I was like, "Did you make Randy Newman laugh?" And he was like, "Yeah, he thought it was pretty funny. They brought him a record that wasn't his design." He was like, So
you should do a cover version of you covering Harry Nilsson doing Randy Newman. That's what I think would be a good idea.
I should do a covers record of Ty Segall covering other people. That's an interesting idea. Let's get all meta on this idea.
We'll get there eventually.
Yeah. I could get like a prosthetic cranium expander and a wig.
Seems like padding.
He's got a big head. Yeah.
He does.
Are we getting good on time here?
Yeah, so we can. So it's I think we've kind of done a nice thing, and we'll give some viewers some kind of break, and you can go take a piss, and we can all get I can get a cup of tea before bed. I mean, it's like 10 to 11 here now, but
I'll tell you what, I really miss touring, and I really miss. I'm looking forward to getting back to the Brudenell and to Leeds and to having a banging curry with you, and you, Mark, in Manchester, and you, Bridget. I'll see you back in San Francisco soon.
I'll see you soon, Papa. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm really looking forward to having a chin-wag, as you say, in person, because this is exhausting even for me at this point. Like I'm forcing myself to be like, everything's okay, and I'm making music. So we'll see. The light is at the end of the tunnel. So stiff upper lip.
Yeah, we're getting there.
Yeah.
So soon. So yeah, thanks for everything, and
take care,
guys. Appreciate it, and
thank you.
Let's say goodbye. Okay.
Nice.
Catch you soon.
Y'all take care.
Bye.